The sun hadn't touched the tree line yet when Corbin Aldine crossed the county line into Holt County, Tennessee. He'd been driving since before midnight, not because the distance required it, but because sleep hadn't come, and the road felt more honest than the ceiling of whatever motel room he'd have stared at instead. The truck knew this highway. Or maybe he just thought it did because some part of him had been rehearsing this drive for 10 years without ever actually making it. Biscuit had his chin on the door handle, back paws hanging off the seat edge. Not sleeping. Just present the way dogs are when they've decided their whole job is to be near you and they're taking it seriously. Corbin hadn't turned on the radio since Cookville. The silence was fine. Silence didn't need anything from him. He was 38 years old, a duffel bag in the truck bed, a dog who trusted him more than he deserved, and a letter from the Holt County Tax Authority folded into the glove compartment that he'd opened once in a gas station parking lot outside Knoxville and hadn't opened again because once had been enough to understand exactly what it meant. Final notice. Property tax delinquency. Parcel 4471, Aldine Road, Holt County, Tennessee. 30 days to settle the outstanding balance or the county would move to auction. He'd read it twice sitting on the tailgate with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Biscuit watching him with that patient expression that communicated without urgency that something was being waited for. 10 years. He'd been getting mail forwarded from that address for a decade. County notices estate correspondence a letter every 18 months or so from a woman at the Holt County Records Office, whose handwriting leaned left and whose patience somehow made everything worse. He'd read every one, folded them back, driven another 200 miles in whatever direction felt least like backward. He wasn't proud of it. He just couldn't stop doing it until now, until 30 days, until he ran out of road. So he turned south. The flashback never came gradually. It never did. Just a phone ringing in the dark. 3 in the morning. His bunk at a naval station in Virginia. Sheets still warm. A voice he didn't recognize saying his parents' names. Highway 9. December. Black ice. The words impact and instantaneous, and I'm so sorry. He'd sat on the edge of that bunk for a long time. Then he'd gone to the bathroom and held both hands under cold water until they stopped shaking. He never went back to that bunk. 6 weeks later, his service ended. He should have driven south. Back to Tennessee. Back to the farmhouse where he'd grown up, where his mother still had his childhood drawings tucked in the kitchen drawer, where his father's work boots would still be beside the back door shaped to his feet. He should have. Instead, he drove north, then west, took jobs that needed hands and didn't ask questions, slept in the truck more nights than not. Biscuit came into his life 2 years after a German shepherd from a shelter outside Nashville, who chose Corbin by the simple method of sitting directly on his feet and refusing to move until the paperwork was signed. He kept getting the letters. He kept not answering, until now. Tennessee rolled past on both sides, pine and red dirt and fence posts leaning in the same direction, like they'd all agreed on something decades ago and kept at it out of habit. The sky was that pale early color that couldn't decide between gray and gold. He knew when he'd crossed into the right part of the county, not by any sign, but by the specific quality of light through the windshield. The way the hills shaped themselves on the western ridge. The stand of loblolly pines that had grown taller than he remembered. A dip in the road where water collected every winter that his mother used to call the Devil's Puddle because she'd driven into it twice and considered it a personal failing of the road's character. He passed the dip slowly. Biscuit sat up, and then the farmhouse came into view. Corbin took his foot off the gas. The truck slowed almost on its own, like it understood this required a different speed. Here is the thing about 10 years. When you stay away from a place that long, you build a picture. You can't help it. The mind needs something to hold. So you construct a version. Roof caved somewhere, windows gone, front porch rotted through. You prepare yourself for a specific kind of damage, the damage of a place that gave up waiting. He'd built that picture somewhere outside Knoxville. He'd been carrying it the whole 6 hours down, and now it was wrong. The fence was standing, not perfectly patched in 2 spots with lumber that didn't quite match, but standing. The front door was on its hinges. The porch steps were solid, and smoke thin and steady was rising from the chimney. Not a fire someone just lit. A fire that had been going for hours. A fire that belonged to a morning routine. A chicken coop in the side yard. His parents had never had chickens. This one was uneven, clearly built without a blueprint. But the chickens inside were real and calm, and making their unhurried sounds like they'd been there always. A shovel leaning against the oak tree by the driveway, like someone had set it down an hour ago. Corbin stopped the truck at the gate. He sat there. Biscuit looked at him. "Yeah," Corbin said. He got out. The gravel under his boots made the same sound it always had. That particular crunch of loose stone over packed dirt. He'd walked this driveway 10,000 times. His feet remembered before his head did. He'd taken maybe 8 steps when the front door opened. A woman stepped onto the porch. Late 20s, black natural hair, pulled back flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled past her elbows. She stood at the top of the steps with her arms at her sides, not crossed, not reaching for anything. Just holding her ground without making a production of it. Behind her, barely visible through the screen door, someone else. Same height, same general shape. Watching with a sideways quality of attention like she was working out angles. Twins. The woman on the porch didn't say hello. She said, "Can I help you?" Not a question. Corbin stopped. Biscuit stopped beside him. "My name is Corbin Aldine. This farm belonged to my parents. The taxes have been delinquent. I'm here to settle them." She didn't react the way people react when they've been caught doing something wrong. Her expression shifted. Something behind her eyes adjusted. But it wasn't guilt. It was the recalibration of someone who has been managing hard situations for a long time and is deciding whether this one qualifies as dangerous. "We've been here 5 years," she said. "We didn't know anyone owned it." A silence followed that was strange. Not hostile, just the quiet of two true things sitting in the same space without resolving each other. "I'm Deja Calloway," she said. "That's my sister Simone inside." And then it happened. The screen door hit the porch railing with a crack. A small figure came out fast like something released under pressure. 5 years old, small, absolutely certain of himself. He was carrying a rifle, wooden, roughly made, one end clearly a barrel, one end clearly a stock. The whole thing painted with what appeared to be red nail polish, for reasons Corbin chose not to examine right now. The boy planted his feet at the top of the steps, pointed the rifle directly at Corbin's chest. No wobble. Completely level. "Don't move," the boy said. "You need to leave right now. This is our house." Corbin didn't move. Biscuit sat down. Corbin looked at the boy, then at the rifle, then at Deja, who had closed her eyes in the specific way of a person enduring something they cannot prevent, then back at the boy. Corbin raised both hands. "All right," he said. "I surrender." The boy blinked. Completely. "What does that mean?" "It means you win." The boy looked at Biscuit, skeptical. "What about the dog?" Biscuit surrenders too. Biscuit, on some cue Corbin hadn't consciously given, lay flat on the gravel with his chin between his front paws. The boy stared at this for a long moment. He had not been expecting full surrender. He was clearly working out what to do with it. "Theo," Deja's voice was firm. "Come inside." "But he has papers. He showed me from the driveway." "Come inside." Theo lowered the wooden rifle approximately 2 inches. Then he looked at Biscuit again. Biscuit thumped his tail once against the gravel, one slow thump, which was apparently sufficient. Theo walked down the steps and sat directly next to Biscuit, placing one hand on the dog's back with the authority of someone who had just been assigned an important function. The tension didn't disappear, but it got smaller, small enough to work around. Corbin reached into his jacket. Both women stiffened slightly, just enough to notice. He slowed his hand, drew out the folded documents, the tax notice, the deed paperwork, the letter from the county recorder. He held them toward Deja without stepping closer. She came down the steps and took them, read without speaking. That kind of composure isn't something you're born with. It's built from years of needing it and having nothing else to fall back on. She handed the pages to Simone without a word. Simone Calloway read faster, looked up at Corbin, looked at Deja. "It's real," she said. Deja answered without turning. "I can see that." Deja handed the documents back to Corbin. "We haven't damaged anything," she said. "We've repaired things." The roof over the back bedroom was open to the weather when we arrived. One window was broken. The porch rail on the left side had pulled away from the post. "We fixed everything. We've grown food on the land. We haven't sold anything from the property itself, only what we raised and made ourselves." Corbin folded the documents and put them back inside his jacket. He looked past her at the front door, which stood open. From the driveway, he could see the hallway. The floor swept clean. A coat hook on the wall with a child's jacket and a woman's scarf. His mother had put up that coat hook. He'd stood on a chair beside her and held the level while she drilled. He was 9 years old. She'd been frustrated with the angle for 3 days before she was satisfied. Something in his chest moved. Not painfully, just moved. "I'm not calling anyone," he said. Deja's shoulders dropped a fraction. Not relief exactly. The first loosening of something that had been held very tight for a very long time. He stepped up onto the porch, stopped in the doorway. He had been building readiness for this moment since Knoxville. He'd constructed it carefully the way you build something that needs to hold weight. It held for about 4 seconds. Then he saw the photograph. Left wall of the hallway. A frame he recognized, dark wood, slightly oval, the kind his mother had found at a church sale, and refinished herself with a stain that smelled like vinegar for a week. She'd been proud of that frame. Told him about it on a phone call like he could see it through the receiver. The photograph inside wasn't one he'd ever seen. His parents standing in front of the farmhouse. Younger than he last remembered them, his father maybe mid-40s, his mother the same. Her head turned towards something just off camera, caught mid-laugh. He'd forgotten that laugh. He'd forgotten the shape of it on her face. Beside his parents, slightly to the right, stood a man. 50s, heavy through the shoulders, smiling in the careful way of someone very aware of how they look when they smile. Corbin studied the face. He didn't know it, not yet. But something registered below the level of recognition, a wrongness he couldn't name because he didn't have enough information to name it yet. He filed it away. "Where did this come from?" he said. Deja came to stand beside him. "We found it under the floorboards in the back bedroom, when we replaced a section of the subfloor that had gone soft. There was a loose board, and underneath it several things. That photograph was one of them." "You don't know who the man is?" "No. We thought maybe a family friend, someone from before." Corbin looked at the photograph a moment longer. His father didn't hide things. Thomas Aldean was the most straightforward person Corbin had ever known. A farmer, a plain speaker, a man who kept everything in its proper place and said what he meant. He didn't hide things because he'd never thought he had anything that needed hiding. So why was this under a floorboard? He stepped fully into the house. The air didn't carry the stale weight of a place abandoned. Someone had swept the floors not perfectly, but with care. Boards that should have rotted had been replaced with mismatched lumber that didn't look beautiful, but held solid underfoot. A fire in the wood stove. On the kitchen table, visible from the hallway, a jar of wildflowers and a coffee can. This wasn't survival by accident. Someone had decided this place was worth keeping and then done the work. He was still standing there when the back door opened. Slow footsteps, unhurried, the sound of someone who moves at their own pace and doesn't apologize for it. An older woman stepped into the hallway, late 60s, black-white hair cut short and close, hands that showed decades of use, not just physical labor, but the layered quality of someone who had grated papers and kneaded dough and planted things and turned pages, all of it leaving its mark on the same pair of hands. She carried a basket of garden vegetables, collard greens, sweet potatoes, small onions with roots still attached. She stopped when she saw Corbin. He stopped looking at the hallway. They looked at each other. "You have your mother's eyes," she said. "Not your mother's name. Not I knew your parents. Just the eyes." As if that was the essential fact and everything else could follow in its own time. Corbin didn't answer immediately. He'd heard that all his life relatives at the funeral, his father's old friends, the woman at the hardware store in Holt, who sold seed packets to his mother every spring. Eleanor's eyes, they always said. He hadn't heard it in 10 years. He'd forgotten how it landed. "You knew her," he said. "We taught at the same school." She set her basket on the hallway table. "Holt County Elementary. Not at the same time, she was there before I started, but she came back once for a book fair. We met maybe 3 times total." A pause. "I recognized you from a photograph she kept on her desk at the school. Found it in storage about 4 years ago, going through old boxes." She extended her hand. "Loretta Mae Purcell. Everyone calls me Miss Loretta." He shook it. "Corbin Aldean. I know who you are," she said. Simply, without drama. She kept that photograph for years. He didn't know what to say to that. Miss Loretta picked up her basket and walked to the kitchen like she'd been doing it for years. Because it turned out she had been. They sat at the kitchen table, all of them. Deja across from Corbin, arms on the table, meeting his eyes directly. Simone Calloway beside her sister, watching with that sideways attention, still calculating. Miss Loretta at the end, already filling the kettle without asking. Theo on the floor next to Biscuit, wooden rifle across his knees on standby in case things went wrong again. Corbin looked at each of them in turn. "Tell me," he said. 5 years ago, Deja and Simone had been moving through Tennessee the way people move when there's no center left to orbit. Seasonal work. Motel rooms when the money held. Simone's car when it didn't. Deja was 3 months pregnant. The man who should have been part of that had looked at the situation, done a quick calculation, and found a reason to leave. Their foster father had been more direct. Get out was what he said. Not in anger exactly. More like he'd been waiting for a reason, and here one finally was. Simone had taken Deja's hand and walked out with her. November. Cold the way Tennessee. November is cold, not dramatic, just relentless. 2 weeks in the car, then a shelter in Milburn with not enough beds and a 30-day maximum. Then back in the car. Then Simone had driven up Aldine Road one evening, looking for a field entrance where they could park out of sight from the highway, and she'd seen the farmhouse dark in every window gate, hanging open weeds working their way up the porch steps. She drove past it twice. Then she turned in. "We checked," Deja said. "We knocked. We waited 2 days before we tried the door. The lock was already broken." "Not defensive," Simone said. "Just accurate. We weren't going to stay." Deja continued. "Just until we figured out what came next." She stopped. Started again. Then Theo came. Born in this house with Miss Loretta's help. After that, leaving felt impossible in a different way. So they stayed. They fixed the roof, patched the broken window, built the chicken coop out of salvage lumber and the stubbornness that comes from having no other options. They planted, learned what the land would give and what it wouldn't. Miss Loretta had been living 3 miles down Aldine Road at the time, renting a small place from a neighbor. She'd arrived with a casserole the first week and stayed when it became clear that someone needed to be there. 6 months ago, when her landlord sold the rental and the next available place was 3 months out, Deja had simply said, "There's a room." No ceremony. Just, "There's a room." Corbin listened to all of it without interrupting. When people explain themselves mid-story, it's never really about you. It's about them needing the discomfort to stop. He let them finish. Then he said, "You mentioned things under the floorboard. What else was there?" Simone got up without speaking, came back from the back room with a small cardboard box, set it on the table. Corbin looked at it. Not at the box itself, at the handwriting on the side. His father's handwriting. Precise, slightly tilted right. The printing of a man who taught himself to write clearly and never quite made it to cursive. "Corbin, when you're ready." Corbin looked at that for a long moment. "You didn't open it," he said. "No," Deja said. "Neither of you." "No." He pulled the box toward him. Without planning it, everyone found somewhere else to be. Simone went to check the back rooms. Deja moved Theo to the far end of the table with a drawing project, his back turned, head bent. Miss Loretta set a cup of tea near Corbin's elbow and walked out of the kitchen without a word. Just the box. Just him. He sat with it for a full minute before he touched anything. The kitchen smelled like wood smoke and something baked earlier in the day. A smell that reached back past 10 years of parking lots and gas station coffee and motel rooms. Back to mornings that had seemed ordinary at the time and only revealed themselves as something else after they were gone. He opened the box. A photograph. His parents in their mid-30s standing in front of the farmhouse the year they bought it. The oak tree barely taller than his father's shoulder. Both of them looking at the camera with the faces of people who have just done something terrifying and are trying not to show it. His father's watch. A Belova with a leather strap repaired once with electrical tape because the tape worked fine, and that was that. The crystal cracked in one corner. His own birth announcement printed from a home computer. Thomas and Eleanor Aldine are pleased to announce, and in the margin in his father's handwriting, already causing trouble. A small notebook, navy blue cover, hardware store variety, $2. His father had kept them for years. Feed schedules, repair lists, weather notes, the working record of an ordinary farming life. Corbin turned through the pages. Fence repair. February, seed order March. Water pump gasket June. Page after page of plain documentation. A life that knew what it was and didn't need to be anything else. He nearly closed it. Then he turned to the last page. 2 lines, written heavier than everything else on every other page. The pen pressed down, the letters deliberate, the writing of a man who needed to be certain something would be read. Gerald Crane, $47,000. Do not sign anything he gives you. Not anything. No date, no explanation. Just the name, the number, the warning. Corbin read it 3 times. Then he set the notebook down and looked at the wall. His father was not a man who wrote warnings in the backs of notebooks. His father was not a man who hid things under floorboards. His father was not a man who left boxes labeled with his son's name in case something happened. Except apparently he had been all of those things. He'd done it without telling Corbin, without calling, without any of the usual methods a man uses to get a message to his son. He'd done it this way, box under the floor, name on the side when you're ready, which meant he'd known. He'd known something might happen. He'd known enough to prepare for it. Corbin closed the notebook. He sat in the kitchen with the sound of Theo's pencil at the far end of the table. Biscuit's slow breathing against his leg. The chickens outside being peacefully indifferent to all of it. He thought about a name he hadn't heard before today. Gerald Crane. $47,000. Not anything. That evening, after a quiet dinner where nobody said much and the silence was the comfortable kind rather than the difficult kind, Corbin went back to the photograph on the hallway wall. The man beside his parents, heavy through the shoulders, that careful smile. Corbin looked at that face for a long time. He still didn't know the name behind the face. He had the name from the notebook, Gerald Crane, but he hadn't yet connected it to the man in the photograph. The connection was coming. He could feel it the way you feel a word sitting just behind your tongue. He slept in the truck that night. Not because there wasn't space Deja had offered the couch without quite meeting his eyes, which was its own kind of grace. The offer was genuine, but the house was small. The situation was strange, and nobody needed a man they'd known for 7 hours sleeping in the next room. He thanked her and said the truck was fine. It was fine. He'd slept in it enough nights that the cab had its own familiarity. He lay on his back looking at the ceiling, the notebook resting on his chest, Biscuit arranged across the passenger seat. Around 2 in the morning, the back door of the farmhouse opened. Footsteps on the porch, not coming toward the truck, just someone standing outside in the dark the way people do when the inside of a house gets too small for whatever they're carrying. Corbin lay still. After a few minutes, the footsteps went back in. The door closed. He thought about his mother in the photograph. Her head turned towards something just off camera, caught mid-laugh. The laugh he'd heard 1,000 times growing up and had completely forgotten the sound of until he saw the shape of it on her face today. That was the thing about 10 years of not going back. You lose things in pieces, quietly, without noticing. Not all at once, one by one, the way you lose small objects during a long move, until one day you reach for something you were certain you had, and it simply isn't there. He'd lost the sound of his mother's laugh without knowing it was gone. Corbin pressed the heel of one hand against his mouth, breathed through whatever came up. Let it move, just let it move. He lowered his hand. Biscuit stirred, resettled, put his chin on Corbin's arm. The wind came in low across the fields. Morning came without ceremony. Gray first, then the slow accumulation of pale gold that passes for spring light in this part of Tennessee. Corbin was up at 5, old habit, the kind installed so deep it stops being a choice and becomes simply what your body does when the dark starts thinning. He walked the full property before the house stirred, not inspecting, not making lists, just walking, getting the measure of ground he'd grown up on but hadn't touched in a decade. The east fence needed work 3 sections down, one post gone soft at the base. He'd fix that first. The greenhouse behind the house stopped him for a full 5 minutes. Salvage lumber for the frame. Plastic sheeting in 2 layers with a deliberate gap between them, a low-tech insulation approach that required real thought to arrive at. Raised beds inside seedlings already growing. Collards. Onions. The beginnings of something that looked like beans. His mother had grown tomatoes in this spot. One summer she tried peppers and declared them a personal insult, then tried again the following year out of principle and been insulted again. He stood there and let himself remember that. Then he went to find the post hole digger. He was clearing the drainage ditch behind the greenhouse that afternoon when the dark sedan turned up the driveway. Clean, expensive, moving with the ease of a vehicle that doesn't worry about roads. A man got out. 50s, heavy through the shoulders, blue suit, shoes that cost more than a week of fence repair. He walked toward the house with the ease of someone accustomed to arriving places and being welcomed. Deja was already on the porch. Corbin set down his tools and walked around the side of the house. The man saw him, smiled, extended his hand. "Mr. Aldine, I heard you were back in town. Gerald Crane. I've had some interest in this property for a while now, and I thought—" Corbin looked at the man's face, and it hit him. Not just the name from the notebook, the face, the photograph on the hallway wall. His parents standing in front of the house, his mother mid-laugh, the man to their right, heavy through the shoulders. That specific, careful smile. Exactly this smile. This man, standing in his driveway. Corbin let him finish. Whatever Crane was saying about market value and tax situations and resources to help resolve things quickly. Then he said, "I'm not selling." Crane's smile adjusted. Stayed in place, but adjusted. "I understand it's a lot to take in. I don't need an answer today. I'm not selling." A beat. Crane looked at the house, then back at Corbin. The smile one more time. "You know where to find me." He walked back to his car, got in, and drove away. Corbin watched until the car was gone. Then he stood in the gravel driveway a moment longer. His father's warning sitting in his chest like a stone he'd swallowed. Do not sign anything he gives you. Not anything. He went back to the drainage ditch, but his mind was already somewhere else entirely. That night, Corbin sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open in front of him. 2 lines, heavy ink, his father's hand. Deja stood at the kitchen counter with her back to him, washing out the coffee pot. Not talking, not needing to fill the air. After a while, she said without turning around, "He's been here before." Corbin looked up. "Crane, about 8 months ago, said he was doing research on agricultural land values in the county. Asked if we'd seen any county notices on the property." She set the pot down. "We hadn't. He left a card. We didn't call." "Did he say anything else?" "He asked how long we'd been here. He asked if we knew who owned it." She turned around then, looked at Corbin directly. He already knew who owned it. Corbin didn't say anything for a moment. "He knew you were coming," Deja said, "before you even got here." "Yeah." She looked at him, at the notebook on the table, at his face, reading something in it the way certain people learn to read what's happening underneath what's being shown. Years of having to. Years of watching for what was coming before it arrived. "What's in the notebook?" she said. "A warning. My father wrote it. Last entry different from all the others. His name, a number, and a warning not to sign anything he gives me." She looked at the table, then she said simply, "Okay," just that one word, but the way she said it, flat and forward-facing, like someone already turning toward what comes next, told Corbin that she wasn't going anywhere. That whatever this was, she would stand in it with him. Not because she owed him anything, but because this house had been her home for 5 years, and she was done being the kind of person who waited to be told what was happening in her own home. She folded the dish towel over the oven handle, turned off the kitchen light, and walked down the hallway. Corbin sat alone at the table. The wood stove ticked softly. Biscuit exhaled from the floor. Outside, the Tennessee night was wide and dark. More stars appearing every minute as the last light drained from the west. His father's farm, his father's warning, his father's name on a box left under a floor. "When you're ready." He hadn't been ready for 10 years. He was here now. And for the first time since he'd turned the truck south, he wasn't thinking about leaving. He was thinking about what needed to happen next. He closed the notebook, slipped it into his jacket pocket, got up, washed his cup, and walked out to the truck. Morning came fast. He was up before 5, the east fence work still unfinished from the previous afternoon. He found the post hole digger where he'd left it and went back to the section of fence that had given up arguing with gravity. The new post was already cut. He set it in the ground, mixed concrete in the bucket hanging on the barn wall, and worked the wire back to tension while the concrete was still finding its shape. Biscuit sat 10 feet away, watching with focused attention. At 9, Theo appeared, binoculars around his neck, a stick he was using as a walking staff, and on his right hand one of Miss Loretta's oven mitts. "I'm ready," Theo said. "For what patrol?" Corbin kept working the wire. "South perimeter first. Stay where I can see you." Theo lifted the binoculars, scanned south, scanned north, looked at Corbin. "What am I looking for?" "Anything that shouldn't be there. What if there's a person? Come tell me. Theo went. For the next hour, he moved along the south fence with the seriousness of someone who has been given a real assignment and intends to honor it. He stopped 3 times to crouch and examine something on the ground. Once he brought back a feather large brown tip curved. Hawk, Corbin said without looking up from the wire. Theo examined the feather again with this new information, then turned and went back to his route. Corbin kept working. The thing was, it helped. Not Theo specifically, not the patrol specifically, just the uncomplicated presence of someone who needed something simple and was completely satisfied when you gave it. Corbin hadn't realized how long it had been since anyone had asked him for something that easy to provide. He was still thinking about that when he found it. He'd moved to the section of fence nearest the county road where the wire had pulled loose from 2 posts and was lying in the grass. He bent to pull it back up and saw it, zip-tied to the post nearest the road facing outward toward the highway. A square yellow placard, official-looking, printed clean, bold black letters on yellow background. Ownership contested inquiry pending Holt County records. Corbin stood in front of it, read it once, then looked closer. No case number, no filing date, no office address, no phone number that would connect to an actual government building. Just the look of legitimacy without any of the substance underneath it. Like a suit with nothing inside it. Like a smile prepared in advance. Well-made theater. Expensive theater. Designed to be seen by neighbors. By the people who bought eggs from Deja at the Saturday market on Mill Street. By anyone driving past Aldine Road who might think twice about whether this was property they wanted to be associated with. Corbin cut the zip ties with his pocket knife, took the sign, walked to the truck, set it on the passenger seat. Biscuit sniffed it once, looked at Corbin. "I know," Corbin said. He backed out of the driveway and pointed the truck toward town. Sheriff Cleet Briggs's office occupied the east end of the Holt County Municipal Building on Main Street, one of those brick buildings from the 1940s that had been added onto twice, painted over 3 times, and still managed to look exactly like what it was. A place where official things happened at official speeds. Corbin had called ahead from the truck. Briggs had said, "Come in." Briggs was at his desk when Corbin arrived. He stood when Corbin came through the door. And here was the thing: he knew who Corbin was before Corbin said his name. It was visible in the way Briggs looked at him. Recognition with something behind it. Not just familiarity, something older. Something that had been waiting. "Sit down," Briggs said. Corbin sat. Briggs was 55, built like someone who had been strong at 30 and kept himself functional without making it a project. Gray at the temples, more gray coming. A face shaped by decades of knowing more than he could act on. The weight of a man who has had to sign his name to conclusions he didn't fully believe. Corbin set the fake sign on the desk. Briggs looked at it. "I didn't issue this. I know it's not county material. I know that too." Briggs set it aside, leaned back, looked at Corbin the way a man looks at something he's been waiting for and isn't entirely glad has finally arrived. Then he said, "I knew your father. We didn't run in the same circles much as adults, different lives. But I respected Thomas Aldine. He was the kind of man who meant what he said. I don't meet many of those." Corbin waited, because there was more. He could feel the more sitting in the room between them. Briggs opened the bottom drawer of his desk, took out a manila folder, set it on the desk between them. Didn't open it. "I signed the accident report," Briggs said. "Highway 9, 10 years ago. December." The room got quiet in the way rooms get when something important is being laid on a table. "Brake failure," Corbin said. "That's what the report says." "That's what the report says." A beat. "Is that what you believe?" Briggs didn't answer immediately. He looked at the folder. The car was serviced 4 days before the accident. One shop within 30 miles at the time. Holt County Automotive on Route 7. Owner was a man named Deshaun Vickers. Good reputation. 11 years in business. He stopped. Vickers sold his stake 8 months after the accident. Relocated to Alabama. I tried to reach him twice in the 2 years after. Neither attempt went anywhere. Corbin looked at the folder. "Who bought Vickers' stake?" Briggs looked at him steadily. "You have a name already. I want to hear yours." "Gerald Crane." Briggs said it at exactly the same moment Corbin did. "Bought 40% of that shop 14 months before the accident," Briggs continued. "I found that out 2 years after the fact, going through old business filings on something completely unrelated. By then, Vickers was gone. The shop had changed hands twice more. Physical records disposed of in the normal course of business. He let that sit. And 19 days after the funeral, Briggs said Crane filed a purchase intent application on the Aldine property. The number landed in Corbin's chest like something dropped from a height. 19 days. His parents not yet in the ground for 3 weeks, and Crane had already been moving on their land. I couldn't close the accident investigation, Briggs said. Couldn't reopen it either. What I had was a connection that looked wrong and a chain broken in 3 places. But you kept the file, Corbin said. I kept it. Corbin looked at the folder, thought about the notebook in his jacket pocket. His father's handwriting pressed deep into the last page. What was the $47,000, he said. Briggs frowned. Where does that number come from? Corbin told him. The notebook, the last entry, the name and the number and the warning written heavy enough to press through to the next page. Briggs listened without interrupting. Then he was quiet for a long moment. Your father came to see me, he said, about 11 months before the accident. Said someone had approached him about a land development deal in the county. Gerald Crane was brokering it, said the numbers didn't hold up. He declined, but the approach hadn't stopped. Did he tell you about money Crane owed him? He mentioned a previous arrangement that had gone sour. Didn't give specifics. Said he had documents he was keeping somewhere safe in case things escalated. A pause. I told him to be careful. That's all I did. I told him to be careful, and I had nothing concrete, and a year later, I was signing his accident report. They sat with that. An old regret and a newer one in the same room. He left a box for me, Corbin said. Under the floorboards, my name on the outside. The photo, the watch, the notebook. He knew something might happen. He prepared for it. And you weren't here to find it. No. Briggs picked up the fake sign, turned it over, set it back down. Crane has been circling this property since your parents died. Knows how to wait. Knows how to apply pressure that's hard to trace. He looked at Corbin steadily. He made you an offer yesterday. I said no. He won't stop at no. I know, he'll find a pressure point. He usually does. Corbin stood, picked up his jacket. Then I need to find the documents my father kept. The ones he mentioned to you. The attorney who handled the estate after the accident. I found the name in the letters I'd been carrying for years. Firm closed a long time ago, but the attorney is still in the state. I called him last night. What did he say? Come in the morning. Briggs stood as well. When you have what you need, come back here first, before you do anything else. You'll be here. I've been waiting 10 years to have something real to work with. Briggs met his eyes. I'm not going anywhere. That evening, Simone Calloway spread papers across the kitchen table. Not asked, not announced. She'd simply been gone most of the day and come back with a folder under her arm, and now the table was covered. Corbin sat across from her. Deja stood at the counter. I've been at the county records office, Simone said, looking at land transaction history, this parcel and the surrounding ones. She pushed the first sheet toward Corbin. I thought it started with 7 families. She pushed a second sheet. It's not 7. Another sheet slid across the table. It's 14. Going back 18 years. Corbin looked at the papers. Simone's handwriting ran down the left margin of each page in a clean vertical list. Names, dates, parcel numbers, transaction types. She had constructed a timeline without being asked, organized it without announcing what she was doing, and laid it out with the flat precision of someone who processes the world through patterns and finds the pattern before anyone else knows to look for one. 3 families lost their land completely, she said. Foreclosure. After a land development agreement failed to generate the promised returns, which it was designed not to generate. She turned a page and slid it toward him. Read that paragraph. Corbin read it, then read it again. The profit-sharing clause in the development contract was built on a revenue threshold that by the definitions constructed elsewhere in the same document would never be met. Not through obvious fraud, through language. Definitions nested inside definitions. Conditions written to appear reasonable on a first read and become impossible on a third. 14 families had been approached across nearly 2 decades. 11 had lost something. 3 had lost everything. Thomas Aldine had refused to sign. And 13 months later, Highway 9. Corbin set the page down, looked at the table, looked at the list of names. The holding company that brokered all 14 transactions, Simone said, changed its registered name 3 times. But the listed principals are the same across every filing. She put her finger on one name at the bottom of the last page. Gerald Crane. The kitchen was quiet. Theo was already asleep. Miss Loretta had gone to the back of the house, and from down the hallway came the low sound of the radio, the late gospel hour. Just the three of them, the table full of papers, the wood stove doing its low, steady work. There's a woman named Nora Delacroix on this list, Simone said. Third from the bottom. She lost her farm 8 years ago. I know that name, Deja said quietly. She waits tables at the diner on Cedar Street. She told me once she never understood the foreclosure, thought she'd made every payment. She had made every payment, Simone said. The development revenue she was counting on never came because it was designed not to. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Corbin stood up, picked up the list of names, folded it carefully, and put it in his jacket pocket next to his father's notebook. I'm leaving for Savannah at 4:30, he said. When I come back, I need this whole package organized. Every transaction, every name, everything you have. Simone nodded once. Already planned, she said. He left before the valley had fully settled into night. Woke at 4:20. Sky still fully dark. Just stars going hard above the fields the way they go out here away from town, where nothing competes with them. Corbin had the truck running and the heater going before anyone in the house stirred. Except he came back inside for the thermos he'd forgotten on the counter. And Deja was there, standing in the kitchen doorway in a flannel shirt and wool socks, holding a travel mug of coffee she'd clearly made while he was outside starting the truck. She held it out. He took it. Their fingers almost touched. Almost. The gap between almost and actually is its own kind of statement. Savannah, she said. Back before dark. Before dark. She looked at him for a moment past the point where the exchange required it. Not long, but long enough to be deliberate. Drive careful, she said. He drove careful. The highway south was empty at that hour. Just Corbin and Biscuit and the headlights working through the dark. Tennessee in early spring before dawn looks like a landscape still deciding what it wants to be. The hills shapeless, the trees just vertical suggestions, the road the only solid committed thing. Corbin drank the coffee Deja had made and thought about attorney Wendell Okafor. He'd found him 4 days ago, 40 minutes of searching on his phone in the cab of the truck after Theo had gone to sleep and the house had gone quiet. The firm had dissolved years back, but Okafor himself hadn't gone far. Retired attorneys in small states don't. They move to quieter offices, take on less. The work becomes more selective, but it doesn't stop. Corbin had called at 8 in the evening. 4 rings, then a man's voice. Direct, unhurried. Okafor. My name is Corbin Aldine. Eleanor Aldine was my mother. A silence, not the silence of someone caught off guard, but the silence of someone who has been waiting for a particular thing to happen and is taking a breath to acknowledge that it has. I wondered when you'd call, Okafor said. She left documents with you. She did. Come in the morning. I'll have everything ready. That was the whole call. Corbin had gone to bed after and actually slept 3 solid hours, which surprised him the way small graces do when you stopped expecting them a long time ago. Attorney Wendell Okafor's office was on the 2nd floor above a hardware store on a side street off Savannah's main corridor. Exterior stairs on the side of the building. A door with frosted glass. Inside 2 windows, a desk, bookshelves from floor to ceiling, and a coffee maker that had clearly been running without interruption for a significant portion of the decade. Okafor himself was 72, thin white hair worn close, eyes sharp in the way of someone who has spent 50 years reading contracts and understanding what the words are actually saying underneath the words they appear to be saying. He stood when Corbin came in, looked at him. You have your father's jaw, he said, and your mother everywhere else. I've heard that, Corbin said. Sit down. Corbin sat. Biscuit settled beside the chair and put his chin on Corbin's boot. Okafor went to the bookshelf. Not a filing cabinet, an actual shelf organized by a system only he could read. He found what he needed in under a minute. A red accordion folder, thick, held together with a rubber band gone brittle with age. He set it on the desk between them. Your mother brought this to me a little over 10 years ago, he said, about 4 months before the accident on Highway 9. Corbin looked at the folder. 4 months. She had been here 4 months before Highway 9. His mother preparing for something she hoped would never happen. She came alone. Okafor continued. She didn't tell your father she was coming, which she mentioned, and which I noted. A pause. She said there were things she needed in safekeeping with someone she trusted. She trusted me because I'd handled a previous matter for your family, a boundary dispute with a neighboring property some years earlier. Minor. But she remembered. He looked at Corbin evenly. She also said that if anything happened to her or your father before she came back for the documents, I was to hold everything until you came for it. She said that specifically, hold it for Corbin. He'll come when he's ready. A pause. It took some time. It did. She said that too, that it would take time. No judgment in it, just the fact of it laid flat. She knew you. Corbin opened the folder slowly. His mother had been a school teacher for 26 years. She knew how to arrange information so that someone coming to it without any prior knowledge could follow from beginning to end and arrive at understanding rather than confusion. She had prepared this for a specific reader. She had prepared it for him. The original property deed, clean, complete. His parents' signatures legible, the county stamp intact. No ambiguity, no gap that a patient man with resources could wedge open. His father's will, properly drawn, properly witnessed. Everything to Corbin, with one provision: the farmhouse was not to be sold within the first 5 years of inheritance and was to be maintained as a family home during that period. The 5-year restriction had lapsed, but the will itself was valid and the ownership was unambiguous. Then the other documents. A promissory note dated 14 years ago, signed by Gerald Crane, acknowledging a personal debt of $47,000 owed to Thomas Aldean, repayable within 3 years. Attached to it, a letter from Crane requesting an extension on repayment dated 13 years ago. A second letter 12 years ago. Another extension requested. And finally, a letter from his father, formal brief dated 13 months before the accident, stating that no further extensions would be granted, that the matter would be referred to legal counsel within 60 days if payment was not received. 60 days, 13 months before Highway 9. Corbin set the promissory note down, picked up the next document, a land development agreement. 14 years ago, Crane's holding company, operating under a name Corbin didn't recognize, had been brokering a development scheme in Holt County. Multiple landowners approached. Thomas Aldean had been one of them. His father had refused to sign. Corbin read the agreement carefully, all of it. Then he read it again. The profit-sharing clause, the thresholds, the definitions nested inside definitions, the conditions constructed to appear reasonable and become impossible. His father had seen it, had refused, had gone back to Crane about the $47,000, had made a final demand: pay what you owe in 60 days or face legal action. A man with a fraudulent scheme in progress. A creditor threatening to drag him into court. 13 months later. Highway 9. December. Black ice. Corbin set the documents down. The room was quiet except for the coffee maker doing something thermal in the corner. She knew, Corbin said. She figured it out, Okafor said. Went through the development agreement line by line, traced the language back, found the loan records, understood what the demand letter meant in context. A pause. She was planning to bring everything to the county attorney. She came to me to make sure the documents survived in case something happened before she got there. Something happened before she got there. 4 months between when she came to me and the accident. Yes. Corbin looked at the documents on the desk. Everything his father had tried to protect by refusing to sign. Everything his mother had quietly, carefully assembled and carried to a man she trusted in a second-floor office above a hardware store. Left there for him, for whenever he found his way back. I already made copies, Okafor said. The first set 5 years ago when it seemed like you might not come. Then again last year, keeping things current. Corbin looked at the man. Thank you, he said. Okafor waved it off. The gesture of someone who doesn't want thanks for doing what was simply right and long overdue. One more thing, Okafor said. He opened the center drawer of his desk, took out a small envelope. White, sealed. Corbin's name on the front in his mother's handwriting. That particular forward tilt. The way she crossed her T's with a slight leftward hook she'd never corrected because she didn't think it needed correcting. She left this separately from the documents. It was personal. Said I'd know when to give it to you. He set the envelope on top of the folder. I think this is when. Corbin picked up the folder and the envelope, tucked them under his arm, shook Okafor's hand. Your father was a man who did the right thing when it cost him something. Okafor said. That's rarer than it should be. Corbin shook the hand. Didn't answer. Some things you can't answer without your voice doing something you don't want it to do in front of a man you've just met. He walked out, sat in the truck for 10 minutes before he started it. Biscuit put his chin on Corbin's arm. Corbin opened the envelope. 3 sentences. His mother had never used more words than something required. I know you think leaving was wrong. It wasn't. Coming back is right. Those are different things. The house is big enough for more than just memory. Fill it. I love you, Mom. He read it twice. Then he pressed the letter flat against the steering wheel. Both hands held it there for a moment. Let the moment be what it was, just a man in a truck holding a letter his mother wrote more than 10 years ago in a second-floor office in Savannah because she loved her son enough to prepare for the worst and leave him something soft to land on when he finally got there. He folded the letter carefully, put it inside his jacket against his chest, started the truck. He was pulling out of the parking space when his phone rang. Simone Calloway. He picked up on the first ring. Tell me, he said. Quiet title action, she said. No greeting, straight to it. This morning while you were in Savannah. He's claiming ownership is disputed and requesting a court-ordered review. Her voice was controlled and flat the way it got when she was managing something much larger than she wanted to show. If it goes unchallenged, it freezes any ownership confirmation and ties the property in process for months. Long enough for him to find another angle. Corbin merged onto the northbound highway. He filed this morning because he knew you'd left. Someone's been watching the gate. How long ago? About an hour. I found it when I checked the county portal. Then I have the deed, Corbin said. The original. And the will, and the promissory note, and the development scheme. The whole picture. A silence. The silence of someone who has been calculating variables all day and has just received the one that changes the equation. All of it, Simone said. All of it. A quiet breath on the other end. Then drive careful. She ended the call. Corbin drove north. He thought about Crane watching the driveway, waiting for the truck to disappear. The same patients his father had identified 11 months before the accident and tried to address through proper channels. The same patients that had moved on the property 19 days after a funeral. The same patients that had waited 10 years for a son who never came home and then moved again the moment that son showed up and said no. Corbin pressed the accelerator down another degree. Gerald Crane, patient for 2 decades, had just run out of time. Corbin set both folders on Briggs's desk and sat down. Briggs opened the primary folder, read without speaking. His face stayed level, the composure of someone who has trained himself to receive information before responding to it. But his jaw tightened when he reached the promissory note. A small tension at the hinge. There and gone. It came back when he reached the development agreement. He read that one twice. Then he set everything down and was quiet. 14 families, he said. Simone Calloway found them. She's been at the county records office for 2 days. She may have more before tonight. Briggs looked at the promissory note again. The date, the amount, the chain of extension letters ending in Thomas Aldine's final demand. 13 months, and the break service was 4 days before. He knew you were going to find this eventually, Briggs said. Once you showed up, once you didn't take the offer, he knew the clock was running. So he filed first this morning while you were in Savannah. Corbin said he waited for the truck to be gone. With the original deed on the record, the quiet title action has no basis, Briggs said. He either didn't know you had it, or he was betting you didn't know what to do with it. What's the timeline? Preliminary review. I can find out in the next hour. But with this, he touched the deed. I'll have the county attorney file a response today. Deed and will as exhibits. The review becomes a formality. And the fraud longer road, opening an investigation, pulling the old accident records, finding Vickers. That takes time, process, cooperation from the state. He paused. But it starts with what you've brought me today. This is real material, not a feeling, not a broken chain. Corbin nodded. He'll know, Briggs said. When we respond to the filing, when the deed lands in the county record, he'll understand what you've got. He may do something reactive. Reactive would be better than patient, Corbin said. Patient is what he's been for 22 years. The corner of Briggs's mouth moved. He slid the second accordion folder across the desk. I'll have the response filed before 5, he said. And the preliminary review is Thursday morning, 9 o'clock, Judge Harlan Fisk. Be there. Corbin was halfway to the door when his phone rang again. Simone Calloway, he picked up. Still at the records office, she said. I found something else. Tell me it's not 14 families. A pause. Not dramatic. The pause of someone who has been staring at numbers all afternoon and needs a breath before saying the last ones. It's 17, going back 22 years. 5 of them lost their properties entirely, not just equity, everything. 2 more are still carrying debt they can't trace the origin of. All 17 transactions run through the same entity. Different names. Same principles. Corbin stood in the parking lot with his hand on the door of the truck. 17, 22 years. Simone's voice shifted, still controlled, but the flatness had something in it now. The moment when someone who processes everything through analysis arrives at something the analysis can't fully contain. This started before we were born, she said. What he did to your parents, it wasn't the first time. It wasn't close to the first time. Come home when you're done, Corbin said. Before dark, she said. She ended the call. Corbin stopped at the diner on Cedar Street on the way back. He hadn't planned to, but he'd been thinking about the name at the bottom of Simone's list since the night she'd spread those papers across the kitchen table. And some things you just do. The diner was half full at mid-morning, coffee always going, pie under a glass dome on the counter, a television in the corner running the morning news with the sound turned low. A woman came out of the kitchen carrying 2 plates. 52. Medium height, natural hair gone mostly silver. She moved with the economy of someone who has been on their feet for long shifts for many years and found a way to get everything done without wasting motion. She set the plates down, turned, and saw Corbin. She came to the counter. What can I get you, coffee? Corbin said. And are you Nora Delacroix? She went still, not alarmed, not defensive, just still. The stillness of someone who has had their name said in unexpected places before and has learned to wait before reacting. Who's asking? My name is Corbin Aldine. My parents were Thomas and Eleanor Aldine. They owned the farm on Aldine Road. Something moved in her face. I know that farm, she said quietly. I know you do. I know your family had land in this county. He paused. I know you lost it. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she poured the coffee without being asked and stood on her side of the counter with both hands flat on the surface. 8 years ago, she said, I made every payment, every single one. The development revenue they promised, it never came. And then the bank said I was in default, and I didn't understand how. And I couldn't afford an attorney to find out how. And by the time I understood what had happened, there wasn't anything left to fight for. There might be now, Corbin said. He took Okafor's card from his jacket pocket, set it on the counter between them. This is an attorney named Wendell Okafor. He's in Savannah. He's been holding documents related to the development scheme that cost you your land. The fraud investigation opened this morning. Officially, the county attorney has the full package. 17 families, 22 years. Nora looked at the card. Her hands on the counter were steady, but her jaw was working through something. The movement of a person who has kept a particular feeling folded up for 8 years and is in the presence of the first moment it has anywhere to go. 17 families, she said. 17. She picked up the card, held it. Didn't look at Corbin when she spoke next. Your parents, she said. What happened to them? We're working on that too. She nodded, looked at the card one more time. Then she looked at him, and what was in her face wasn't exactly gratitude. It was something older and more complicated. The expression of someone who has been told for 8 years by circumstances, by outcomes, by the silence of a system that moved on without her, that what happened to her didn't matter enough to address, and has just been told otherwise. Thank you, she said. Call him, Corbin said. He left the coffee money on the counter and walked out into the mid-morning light. The preliminary review was Thursday at 9. Corbin was up at 5:15. Old habit. No alarm needed. He showered, dressed, put on the jacket, the one with the notebook in the inside pocket. His father's watch on his wrist. Crystal cracked in one corner. Leather strap repaired with electrical tape because the tape worked fine, and that was that. He came to the kitchen at 6. Deja was already there. Coffee going. She was wearing a dark sweater he hadn't seen before, hair down, and she moved through the kitchen without wasted motion, just getting things done because they needed doing. She didn't say good morning. She handed him a plate. Simone Calloway appeared from the hallway, folder under her arm, already dressed, hair pulled back. She sat across from Corbin and opened the folder, slid a single sheet toward him. 17 families, she said. fully documented. Every transaction, every property, every name. She tapped the bottom of the page. County Attorney Sandra Oates has already received the preliminary package from Briggs. She reviewed it last night. You spoke to her. Briggs did. He called me at 9 to confirm. She knows what she's looking at. Corbin looked at the sheet. 17 names, 22 years. She's been the county attorney for 11 years, Simone said. She hasn't seen it at this scale. A pause. She knows exactly what she's looking at. Miss Loretta appeared from the back hallway with Theo on her heels, still in his pajamas. I'm ready, Theo announced. Everyone looked at him. For what Deja said. Support patrol, during the hearing. You're not going to the hearing. Theo processed this. Then I'll hold down the farm. That would be very helpful, Corbin said. Theo nodded, accepted the assignment with the gravity it deserved. Miss Loretta caught Corbin's eye over Theo's head. She gave him a small nod. Just that. Just go. You're ready. We've got things here. Corbin finished his coffee, stood up, picked up his jacket. Deja walked him to the door. Not to the truck, just to the door. Whatever happens in there, she said. I know. No, listen. She looked at him, straight at him. Whatever happens in there, you came back. You found it. You did every part of this that needed doing. She paused. Your parents did the work first, but you came back to finish it. That's not nothing. Corbin looked at her for a moment. She wasn't asking him to say anything. She'd said what she needed to say, and now she was just there standing in the doorway of the house she'd kept alive for 5 years. I'll be back before dark, he said. I know you will. He walked to the truck. The Holt County Courthouse was 3 buildings east of Briggs's office on the same street. Brick 1930s construction steps worn smooth in the center from decades of feet. A lobby that smelled like old carpet, and the particular patience of a place where official things happen at official speeds. Briggs was already inside when Corbin arrived. Short nod, the nod of a man who has done what he said he would do and is ready for whatever comes next. County Attorney Sandra Oates was at the table. Files open, organized in the way of someone who had reviewed everything the previous evening and arrived this morning with a complete picture and a clear plan. She was 43. The kind of professional composure that doesn't perform itself, it's just there like a load-bearing wall. You only notice it when you lean against it and it holds. She looked at Corbin when he sat down. Mr. Aldine, I've reviewed the full document package. A pause. I want you to know what we're walking in with. The original deed and will establish unambiguous ownership with no gaps in the chain. The promissory note and demand letter establish motive. The development agreement establishes a pattern. Together, the quiet title action has no legal basis, and Judge Fisk will see that in approximately the first 10 minutes. And after that, she said carefully, we are in a different conversation. One that takes longer, but one that starts today. Then Gerald Crane walked in. Blue suit, dark slacks. Those shoes. He came through the door with his attorney, a younger man, mid-30s, who carried his briefcase with the careful confidence of someone who had been told this morning was straightforward and had believed it. Crane took his seat on the other side of the table, set his hands flat on the surface, composed, unhurried, the posture of a man who had been in rooms like this before and knew how to appear like he belonged in them. The smile still there, but working harder than it had in Corbin's driveway. The effort showing at the edges in a way it hadn't that day. Because that day, Crane had held all the information. He'd known about the tax delinquency. He'd known the son had been gone 10 years. He'd calculated that documents from an estate handled by a firm now long dissolved would be slow to surface if they surfaced at all. He'd been betting on bureaucratic friction. He'd been betting on absence. He had been wrong about what Corbin had been doing in Savannah. Judge Harlan Fisk entered at 8:59, 64 years old, a face shaped by decades of distinguishing between legitimate disputes and manufactured ones. He sat, looked at the room. We're here on a quiet title action filed by the Crane Land Group, claiming disputed ownership of Parcel 471 Aldine Road, Holt County. He opened the file in front of him. Miss Oates, you filed a response on behalf of the recorded title holder. Yes, Your Honor, with exhibits. Oates stood and placed the documents on the bench. The original deed, the will, the full documentation of unbroken ownership from original purchase to the present day. The tax delinquency, she noted, was in the process of being resolved within the 30-day statutory window. Judge Fisk looked at the documents. read without speaking, asked two procedural questions both directed at Oates. Both answered in under 30 seconds. Then he looked at Crane's attorney. Counsel. Crane's attorney leaned slightly forward. Your Honor, we may wish to withdraw the action pending further review of the presented. I'll make that determination, Judge Fisk said. He went back to the documents. The room was quiet. Crane's hands were flat on the table. 4 minutes. Then Judge Fisk looked up. The quiet title action filed by the Crane Land Group is dismissed. He set his pen down. Ownership of parcel 4471. Aldine Road is confirmed as Corbin Thomas. Aldine uncontested. He looked at Oates. Miss Oates, I understand there are additional matters pertaining to historical land transactions in Holt County currently under review. Yes, Your Honor, we anticipate further filings in the coming weeks. Judge Fisk nodded once. I'll look forward to them. He rose. The room began to move. And then Corbin looked at Crane, because he needed to see it. Crane was looking at the deed, the original, still lying on the table where Oates had placed it as an exhibit. His parents' signatures at the bottom. His mother's handwriting, that forward tilt, the leftward hook on the T's, she'd never corrected because she didn't think it needed correcting. His father's more deliberate printing, the careful letters of a man who had taught himself to write clearly. 2 signatures on a piece of paper. Everything Crane had been working around for 10 years. Corbin watched him look at it, and he saw the precise moment, the moment when the calculation completed. When Crane understood not just that today was lost, but that the position he'd been building for 22 years had been systematically taken apart by a chain of careful people. A father who refused to sign, a mother who kept records, an old attorney who kept faith, a son who finally came home. No dramatic reaction, no raised voice, just a man sitting very still while something internal reorganized itself into a shape he hadn't planned for. The smile was gone, completely gone. What was left in its place was just a face, an ordinary middle-aged face, no longer performing anything, no longer needing to. Corbin picked up the deed, held it for a moment, slid it back into the folder. He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. He walked out of the courthouse into the morning light. He sat on the front steps for a moment. Just sat. The street in front of him. Cars going by. The ordinary Thursday morning in Holt County, going about its business like it always had. He called Briggs. 1 ring. It's done, Corbin said. I know, Briggs said. Oates called me from the parking lot. A pause, the particular quiet of a man setting something down he's been carrying a long time. The fraud investigation opens formally this afternoon. I spoke with the state's office this morning. They want everything. Simone Calloway has the full package. 17 transactions, all documented. Good. She can bring it to Oates directly. Briggs was quiet for a moment. Your father kept records because he believed someone would eventually use them. Your mother made sure they'd survive long enough. Both of them did their part. Corbin looked at the road ahead. The turn onto Aldine Road visible from here. Are you staying? Briggs asked. Corbin looked at the fence line visible from the street. The new post still pale wood against the weathered gray of the others. The oak tree at the driveway entrance bare-branched in the early spring cold, but undeniably a live root system going deep into ground his family had owned for 26 years. Yeah, he said. Briggs said good and hung up. He came back to the farm before noon, came through the front door. Deja appeared from the kitchen dish towel over her shoulder, reading his face in approximately 1 second. Done, he said. Dismissed. Ownership confirmed. She let out one breath, short, sharp, the kind that comes after you've been holding something since before sunrise, and finally the reason to hold it is gone. Briggs is filing the fraud investigation this afternoon. The state wants the full package. Simone Calloway was already at the kitchen table, laptop open, folder organized and labeled beside it. She looked up at Corbin. 17 families, she said. I'll bring it to Oates directly. Good. She put it together. It's right that she delivers it. Simone considered that, accepted it, turned back to her laptop. Miss Loretta appeared from the hallway. One look at the room. Good, she said. Then Theo has been on support patrol since 7 this morning. He found something near the south fence he's classified as significant, and he has been waiting very patiently to brief you. Corbin looked at the ceiling briefly. Tell him I'll debrief in 10 minutes. He'll want it in 5. Tell him 10. Miss Loretta walked back down the hallway. 10 minutes, she called, muffled but perfectly clear. And from somewhere deeper in the house, fine. but it's very significant. The significant finding was a very large beetle, which Theo had named Sergeant. Sergeant is staying outside, Corbin said. Obviously, Theo said, slightly offended that this needed saying. That evening, they paid the taxes. A practical thing, an online transaction, a form filled out, a payment submitted, a confirmation number appearing on a screen. Bureaucratic, unremarkable. Except the balance had been sitting there for 10 years, growing patient in its own way, waiting for someone to come back and deal with it. Simone Calloway typed in the payment information and paused with her fingers on the keyboard. Looked at Deja. Deja looked at Corbin. Corbin nodded. Simone submitted. Payment received, balance cleared, account current. The three of them looked at it for a moment. Just a moment. Then Theo came in from the back hallway in his socks, having apparently been listening from around the corner with the subtlety of a 5-year-old, which is to say none at all. He looked at the laptop screen, looked at his mother, looked at Corbin, looked at the screen again. He climbed onto his chair, stood up on it. We won the tax battle, he announced. And Miss Loretta Purcell, who had appeared in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel, burst out laughing. Not a small laugh, not a polite, contained laugh. The real version, the kind that takes over your whole body and makes you need to find something to hold on to. She reached for the counter and then simply decided the floor was fine and sat down on it back against the cabinets, laughing in a way that had clearly been building for a while. Maybe for 5 years, maybe longer, which made Simone Calloway laugh, which came out of her face in a way that visibly surprised even Simone. She covered her mouth, gave up covering it, let it happen. Deja pressed both hands over her face. Her shoulders were shaking. Biscuit stood up from his spot by the refrigerator, looked at each person in the room in sequence, decided this was acceptable, and sat back down. Corbin stood in the doorway, Miss Loretta Purcell on the kitchen floor laughing. Simone, with tears tracking down her face, trying to explain to a confused Theo why the tax battle was funny, which it wasn't exactly, except that it was. Deja, with both hands still over her face, her whole body shaking with something that had been held in for 30 days, or possibly much longer than that. His father's house, his mother's kitchen. He pressed the back of his hand against his mouth, breathed once, let it stay and let it move at the same time. Both were allowed. Theo, he said. Theo looked down at him from the chair, completely serious about the tax battle. Good call, Corbin said. Theo nodded. I know. Miss Loretta Purcell started laughing again from the floor. They ate outside that evening. Miss Loretta had pushed for it, and nobody had the energy to argue. And it turned out as it generally did when Miss Loretta pushed for something, that she was right. 3 extra trips for chairs, a folding table from the barn, 2 wooden crates serving as overflow surface. The result was structurally improbable and entirely comfortable. The backfield at dusk, the sky doing its evening sequence, orange, then rose, then the deep blue that comes just before the stars. Cornbread that Theo ate with a dedication bordering on spiritual. Bean soup. The fire pit going more for the company of it than the warmth, though the warmth didn't hurt. Theo updated Corbin on the afternoon patrol in full detail. 2 hawks over the east field. 1 suspicious pile of rocks near the drainage ditch that turned out upon investigation to be a regular pile of rocks. And Sergeant the Beetle, who had been relocated to the base of the oak tree and was thriving in his new position. Sergeant is a good name, Corbin said. Theo considered this. He earned it, he said. After the dishes were cleared, Theo arranged himself in Miss Loretta's lap with the bird book open across both of them and was asleep before the 3rd page. Miss Loretta Purcell looked down at him, then out at the field, and didn't move. Simone Calloway was inside already, laptop open, working on the next thing. Because Simone didn't stop. That was simply who she was. Which left Corbin and Deja at the porch railing. Not arranged there, just both arriving at the same place at the same time, because there was nowhere else that made more sense. The field in front of them, the tree line at the far end going dark, the first stars coming out over the eastern ridge. The north room, Corbin said. Deja looked at him. It hasn't been used since I got here. Needs work, new subfloor in the corner, window resealed. But it's a room. She waited. My mother's letter said fill the house. He looked at the field. I've been thinking about what that actually means. Not abstractly, concretely, what does it mean? It means a room for someone who needs it. Not a shelter, not a program, A real place for a while. For someone who's run out of road. He paused. The way you ran out of road. Deja was quiet for a moment. Miss Loretta would want to help with that, she said. Simone would set up a system. Rules intake. She'd say it was for practical reasons. She'd be right that it needs rules. Theo would give everyone a patrol assignment. The corner of her mouth moved. And you'd fix whatever was broken. That's the part you know how to do. She was looking at the field, the way she looked at the greenhouse when she was working out what it needed. Not just seeing what was there, seeing what it could hold. Okay, she said. Just that. 2 letters. But the weight in them, the weight of something decided between 2 people who had stopped needing ceremony to make things real. Corbin turned toward her slightly. Not much. Enough. I didn't come here for this, he said. I know, I came because I had no other direction. That's usually how it works. Her voice was quiet. You think I turned up Aldine Road on purpose? I was 23 years old. It was November. I needed somewhere to park. That was all I was doing. He thought about that. 23 years old, Simone's car, November in Tennessee, cold without drama and not apologizing for it. Driving up a road she'd never been on. Finding a farmhouse with every window dark. Staying because staying was the only move left. My mother knew someone would come, he said. She wrote it in the letter. Said if you find someone already there, look at them before you decide anything. Deja was quiet. I looked, he said. She turned toward him the same small degree. Enough. I know you did, she said. He looked at her, not the careful measuring look he'd been using since he arrived. The sideways kind with distance built into it. Straight at her. The way you look at someone when you've stopped calculating the gap. I'm staying, he said, present tense, not a decision announced. A fact reported to someone who had earned the reporting. She held his eyes. I know, she said. And she didn't move away from where she was standing. And he didn't move away from where he was standing. And the field was dark and wide in front of them. And the stars were coming out one by one over the eastern ridge. And the house behind them was warm and full and making its small sounds. That was it. That was the whole of it. No ceremony, no announcement. Just 2 people standing at the railing of a farmhouse porch in Tennessee in early spring, having arrived here by completely different roads, deciding without making a production of it that this was where the road ended and that the ending was fine. More than fine. Inside, Miss Loretta Purcell turned a page. Theo shifted in her lap, still deeply asleep, and said something that might have been Caterpillar. Miss Loretta looked down at him. 68 years old. She had thought when the classroom was gone, and her brother was gone, and the apartment was gone, that she was at the end of the useful portion of her life. Not dramatically, just in the quiet way that comes when the shape of your days loses its form and you can't reconstruct it from what remains. She had come here because Deja had offered a room and a seat at the table. She had stayed because of a boy who needed someone to sit beside him every evening with a book, because that was the thing she knew how to give, and he was the thing that needed it. She looked at the bird book open on Theo's chest, the page on hawks, the one he'd had her read 3 times that week. She looked at the house around her, the wood stove, the mismatched chairs from 4 different sources that somehow worked together, the wildflowers in the coffee can on the counter that Theo had picked from the south field 3 days ago because he decided the kitchen needed them. The sound of a house being lived in, not endured, not merely survived, actually lived in by people who had chosen it and kept choosing it. Miss Loretta May Purcell, former 2nd grade teacher, current resident of a farmhouse that had been kept alive by stubbornness and need and the grace of people who show up for each other without being asked, sat in her chair with a sleeping 5-year-old in her lap and felt for the first time in a long time that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Which was enough, more than enough. It was the whole thing. Corbin stayed at the railing a moment longer. Biscuit padded out from inside and came to lean lightly against his leg, looking out at the dark field. Tomorrow there would be more fence to check. The north room needed a new subfloor. Nora Delacroix needed to call Okafor. The fraud investigation was open, and the road ahead was long, and none of it was going to be simple. But tonight the field was dark and wide and full of quiet. Tonight the house was warm behind him. He looked at the fence line he'd repaired, holding straight in the dark. The oak tree at the driveway entrance shaped by wind and years into something that looked exactly like what it was. a tree that had been here a long time and intended to keep being here. He thought about his father writing a final demand letter and trusting the process. He thought about his mother driving to Savannah alone and leaving everything that mattered with a man she barely knew but trusted completely. He thought about a boy with a wooden rifle and red nail polish who had defended this house before Corbin even knew it needed defending. He thought about a woman who had read every library book about greenhouse insulation because losing half her seedlings to cold was a problem she intended to solve. He pressed his hand flat on the railing, felt the wood under his palm rough-weathered, repaired in one section with newer wood that didn't quite match. Deja's repair. Second winter she was here. It held solid. He'd come back later than he should have. A decade later. And the house had been here. The people in it had kept it alive. His mother had kept the documents safe. His father had written the warning in the back of a $2 notebook and left it where it would survive. Everything had waited for him. For whenever he was ready, he was ready. He was here. And for the first time in 10 years, standing on the porch of the house where he grew up with Biscuit, warm against his leg, and the Tennessee stars doing what they do above the fields. Corbin Aldine let his shoulders drop. Let himself be finally completely exactly here. Because the road had ended here. And the ending was not what he'd expected. It was not ruin. It was not grief standing alone in an empty house. It was not 10 years of absence pressing down into nothing. It was this. 5 people and a dog and a mason jar of caterpillars on a windowsill. A boy who had defended this farm with a wooden rifle before he was old enough to understand what he was defending. A woman who had built a greenhouse out of salvaged lumber and library books. A retired school teacher who had sat down on a kitchen floor and laughed until she needed the wall. A mother who had known. A father who had prepared. And a son who had finally come home. Corbin stayed.